futures at our feet.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Edufuturists podcast. It is an absolute pleasure, an honour, a blessing to have you here, and it's great that we've got another guest in the studio. They are coming thick and fast. Not for you, just for me and Ben. Joe, you get them in your weekly bite-size chunk, lands into your inbox on a Saturday and goes out globally on a Monday. But me and Ben are recording so many wonderful conversations, and I'm sure this one will not be any different. Ben, how are you doing, man? Still grey behind you from what it was when we recorded the last one? How's everything going,
Still
man?
grey. Everything's grey, my friend. Everything's rosy, as
Just
they
not the
would
hair.
say. Just not the hair. Well, no, my beard's a bit grey if I let it grow. But yeah, it's grey, it's wet. But let's be really honest. Life is good. We've got loads of stuff going on. By the time this is going out, we've done another roadshow, webinars. The book's probably moved on a little bit more. We're probably about 7 million votes in the Edufuturist Uprising for the awards that are coming, because it's all coming thick and fast. We're very much looking forward to everybody joining us over in Liverpool. So yeah, all good fun.
Absolutely. And without further ado, let's invite our guest in, Dr. Robin Harwick. Robin, do you want to kind of go through yourself, your experiences, your background, and how everything relates to education, hopefully? If not, probably on the wrong podcast. And if you're from woodwork, it's the next one and the next door along.
All right. It's always hard with these introductions. I wear a lot of hats. I do a lot of things. So when people ask for my introduction, it's kind of even difficult to figure out where to start. So I'll start by saying I'm either by fluke or by fate an educator. It was not my career path. It's not what I originally wanted to do with my life. My first degree is in environmental science and management. And, when I'm looking at social issues and thinking about, working with communities and everything, it always kept going back to, well, what we really need to do if we want to solve some of these large scale issues that we are facing in the world today is we need more education. We need more education. We need more education. So I always kept circling back to we need more education. So that's why I say by fluke or by fate, I became an educator. I'm a research scientist. And one of the things that I have noticed over my career is, the huge gap between research and practice. And that's really frustrating, right? So when you know that there's depending on what you read, 12 to 15 year gap between research and practice, you really see that we have some big challenges, because do we need more interventions? Do we need more research? Well, heck, the schools aren't even doing the things that we knew were best practice 10 years ago in the research world, right? So that is in a nutshell how the pro-remote democratic high school came to be. It is really my frustration with the system, wanting to get research into practice right now for the kids that are in the system. And while I still work at a systems level to try to change the educational system, I also know that there are students that are being harmed within that system today, and I wanted to give them a safe space. So I started the school. I also teach in Masters of Education programs, Masters in Globalization, Masters in Special Education. So I'm planting seeds for current and future educators who do work in the systems, who do work in public schools, who do work in international schools abroad. So, in my life goal, I'm just trying to completely change the education system and also give students a place to be while we're working on those other things. So I'll leave it at that for now, because I'm sure you'll ask more questions that will bring in more of my work throughout our conversation.
Yeah, that's super cool, and I think it's super cool that we've probably got an alignment in terms of we want to change education for the better. We started the Edufuturists podcast 10 years ago as a conversation about technology and how that can help in education, and it pivoted very, very quickly into being a conversation about what does the future of education look like. And so to be able to listen to people, learn from people, share messages of what people are doing, and then doing that as a collaborative, as a community, because it's not about Ben and Steve, it's about how do you shine a light on people that are doing really good stuff and making a difference, which is why we do everything that we do generally. Sometimes I think, have I got time for another podcast, another article, another social media post, another event, well, if we're pushing the needle, we're pushing the needle, and it's good. So Obviously, you're coming to us, and I don't know if I missed this but you're coming to us from central Mexico. So when you're recording this, it's a little bit warmer, I'm guessing, than what we've got here. It's currently 11 degrees centigrade here. What are we looking at in central Mexico?
Probably at least maybe 27 right now because it's still morning. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah. Not jealous at all. I am going to tell my wife that I've just been on call with somebody and it's 27 degrees in the morning, and she's going to be like, "Why don't we move there?" So obviously, the Pearl Remote Democratic High School. There's some key bits in all of that, but being remote, being democratic, being a high school, and being Pearl. Could you maybe tell us about who you are and the work that you're doing to advance that mission and the vision of what you're trying to do?
Yeah. So, we have a foundational text, which I always have right here next to me. I did not make this up. I did not give myself credit for this. This is The Democratic Classroom Theory to Inform Practice by Doctors Art Pearl and Tony Knight. This text was written in 1999. And so one of the things that I always hear is, "You are so innovative. This is so innovative what you're doing. The philosophy is so innovative." And I'm like, 1999, y'all. We've had this mapped out for a long time. I was fortunate to be a student of Dr. Art Pearl, and so he brought a lot of the pieces together for me. When I was in my doctoral program, as many of us are, we're thinking like, I've got to start something new. I've got to create something new in this work. And what I learned again is like, we need to do what we already know works for kids, and instead of waiting for another 10 years for those things to start happening or creating more research. So I decided that, I would start the Pearl based on Dr. Pearl's work. And what I did is I reached out to his family. He had passed away a few years before the school and started. And I said, is this something that you feel comfortable with? Dr. Pearl was an advocate for public schools. And so I was a little worried that his family might be against us doing something that was a private school. So we made the school a nonprofit. But it really is based in his work. And so when we talk about the democratic school for the Pearl, it really is related to what is in this text. So, when people have democratic schools, a lot of times it goes in different directions and, people have different ideas about what democratic school is. For our school at the Pearl, part of it, like very at the core of the mission, is informed, competent citizens. So I think that's one area that we are a little bit different, like really thinking about democracy, thinking about what democracy looks like. How do young people know how to participate in democracy if they've been in an authoritarian school system their entire life? And so that's a big piece of who we are. And another big part of it is inclusive. Again, when we have a democracy, we want to have an inclusive society. Again, how do people know how to participate in an inclusive society of people with disabilities? Differences, different cultures, all of those kind of things. If they haven't experienced that in their whole education. And so those are really core values of ours as well.
And it's really interesting. I suppose if I read out the mission and then also say that, well, why is it so important? I suppose that's the question that I will go to in terms of your mission is providing international high school students an online demographic education that balances personal, social interests to become informed, competent and involved citizens in a safe, anti-racist environment. If everybody's saying, well, isn't that what education is doing anyway? Why is it so different? I suppose, why do you feel it's so important? Why is this work so significant? And why is it a cut away from currently what already exists in America and globally, I guess?
Well, yeah, I mean, look at the world today. I mean, that's the answer to the question, right? And when we think about the way that people are able to be fooled by those that have leadership positions, and you know uh, there's not enough critical engagement, there's not enough questioning. How do we know what is true? So we're thinking about media literacy as part of this. Also, what is our responsibility? So part of democracy, and one of the things that we talk about a lot in the classroom, it's not just about what you get and what you extract from this experience. It's also what you bring to this experience and what is your responsibility to the community. that you are in. And I think that that is really critical because, I always tease with my students, I don't like group projects. And I was like, this is one big group project. Like, we live on one planet together. It is a group project. We make decisions about, our lives and if we choose to not participate. So those are conversations we have too. A student says, well, I don't care. I don't care what book we read. I'm not going to vote on it. I'm not going to give a suggestion. I'll read whatever anybody else picks. Okay. I mean, these are low stakes, kind of seeing about what it means to not participate and not use your voice. And then we start reading the book and we realize, you know what? I don't like this book. I didn't want to read this book anyway. And I say, okay, well, you didn't want to read this book. You didn't mention that during the discussion. You said anything was fine with you. You said, I don't want to vote. I'll let other people decide. So how does it feel now that we're committed? We're reading this book. We're in chapter 4. We're going to finish it. Your voice wasn't present at the table. You chose not to participate. And what does that mean? And then we take it from that small scale. I hate this book. I'm stuck reading this book. This book is stupid, right? To what does it mean when you don't vote? What does it mean when you don't participate in civic engagement? And you are not, being part of that conversation. And so it is like going small, pulling back, right? Going small and then pulling back, big picture again.
It's really interesting. It's more of a statement, and I think the world is fascinated currently by AI and the disruption that it will bring. Of it gets it wrong, it's biased, and all of those things. And I totally agree. Well, look at what the humans are doing. We're not doing a great job on our own anyway, so we can criticize the machines, absolutely. But at the same point, it's not just about, it's applying that to all context.
Mhm.
Ultimately, we should have been doing a better job of really challenging and critically analysing the information that's been put out. And not just conflict of disagreement, actually positive conflict of, I disagree, and this is the impact it has. It's that candor element as well. We just are not doing a great job with the world as human beings. Never mind, the machines will wreck the world. Let's be honest. We're
Yep.
doing shit.
Yep. We're
Come
doing a
on,
good job of
adults and
that
humans.
today.
We're just just in general. I know there's everybody say, it's related to the news currently. It's not. We've just been doing not a great job for such a long period of time. And we're not
Yep.
really. I really worry for my children that
Yep.
actually, us as adults, we're not doing a great job for the future for our children. My kids are so young, and I just think, I want to get off. Never mind them. Get off this roundabout. But yeah, maybe a statement rather than anything else. And Ben, I know you want to jump in because it's a passion of yours for just lots of many different ways.
Yeah, I think it's that bit of there's nothing wrong with technology. It's a neutral thing until we make it a thing that, if we don't put guardrails into place, if we don't help people navigate it, if we make it inequitable, if we make it so that it's perpetuating a bias, if we make it so that all the bits that go with it, them things in themselves can be neutral as the actual product of the tech. It's then how it's pushed out and who can use it and who can't. And also tied to that is that you're right, we aren't doing a particularly great job at trying to make the world a better place anyway, because it feels like, is it better than it was? And I do hear some people go, well, actually, this is the safest time in human history. People live longer than they've ever lived in human history. There's less threats to the world than ever in human history. It's fairer and more equitable than any other time in human history. Okay, great. So we're comparing ourselves to Genghis Khan's time and other crazy conquistadors and all the other people that go with that. Like, that's not necessarily the bar that we want to compare ourselves against, right? So in this space, and I do want to kind of dig into like the vision and why you're doing what you do. Would before we get to that, you've just shared some stuff there that just like, and I know you said it's not revolutionary. These people have been talking about it for a number of years. But for a lot of people that are listening to this, the fact that you said the phrase, voting on a book that we were going to read, is absolutely alien, isn't it, in lots of places? So the fact that we have a curriculum, these are the 10 books that we're going to cover. They all happen to be written by old white men generally. And so we do a little bit of a curriculum review. We might throw a black woman in there to make us feel better about ourselves. Actually, you use a phrase, voting on a book. I wonder if you could talk practically a little bit about what being a democratic school looks like, because I think you just said it like a throwaway statement, but that was like, as a teacher who determined what books people read generally, or the curriculum and the specification told them what they needed to read, you're doing it slightly different, aren't you?
We're doing it very different. We co-create the curriculum with our students, so it inherently becomes personally meaningful and culturally relevant, right? So we have our learning objectives, and actually we're in the process of being accredited through Middle States Association, and we are aligning-ish with Washington State learning standards, because that's where the Pearl is based out of. And what it means is, like, we know in high school, these are the standards of what students with an accredited diploma are expected to have. How we get there is our decision, right? So it's actually really great because it's backwards planning. I looked at the Washington State learning standards and I go, that seems reasonable. You know, high school students should know those things, but how we get there is different. So I have those always in my mind. All of our teachers do, right? You have those learning objectives in your mind, and you're like, how are we going to get there? Okay, so we're going to read and we're going to think about some books. So, you know, talking with your students, really building those relationships. What kind of things are they interested in? And how, you know, oftentimes they need a little support. You know, here's a menu of options. Here's some books that we could potentially read. You know, feel free to bring your own recommendations to the table. They're teenagers, so they do try to like read books that they have already read. And, you know, sometimes we allow that. You know, it's like, okay, you love this book and you want your peers to read it. That's valid. But I also want the students to stretch. So what it means in a, you know, daily practice as a teacher, I tell my teachers, do not plan more than 2 to 3 weeks out, because we want to follow the student as well. So if they're really engaged and really interested in a topic, we don't just push them on. Also, as you're reading a book and you're starting to have these really great conversations, you see like a natural progression. Oh, we can take this even deeper, because now we can do some companion articles. Now we can watch some videos, some documentaries or whatever. If you've planned too far out, you miss that. And I think one of the big mistakes that teachers make often is, let's say Steve says, you know, I'm really into learning about Cairo right now. I'm like fascinated about what's happening in Cairo, and I read this article, and you're like, you know, Steve, we'll get to that next term in geography. Hold off on that. You know, Steve is not going to be interested in that, you know, 6 months from now. I'm interested in it right now. And so we don't delay that. When we see that passion coming up, when students are interested, when they want to have a conversation about something, and they're animated again, that's when we say, okay, let's go with this. And so if teachers overplan, then you're not able to follow that democratic process, because you're trying to, you know, always steer it in one way, and you're missing those opportunities for students to really engage with their learning. So we go deep, right? And I think that is something that is really different. Families say to me, well, how do you know that this methodology is going to make sure that my child is prepared for university? Quite a few of us have PhDs, and we're like, we teach at university. That's how we know. And we also know the things that our students at the university level can't do, because they never had the opportunity to do it in K-12. They never got an opportunity to go deep, to critically engage, to, you know, learn about like synthesis. That's one of the areas I see even my grad students struggle, right? The lit review is not a synthesis of knowledge. It's, I read this article, I read this article, I read this article, I read this article. Yeah, but what does it mean that you read those 5 articles, and how do you pull that together? So we use Socratic seminars, and you know, students in we have multi-age classrooms, so we have 8th through 12th grade, sometimes 7th grade if a student petitions to come in early. And they're listening to this like, you know, oh, this other person watched a video about a topic, and somebody else read um, an article, and somebody else looked at some blog posts from people that were living in that area, and were synthesizing. So they're starting to understand how bringing in different perspectives enriches the conversation, rather than us always only reading the same thing and talking about that one thing. I don't know if that answers your question, but I mean, it's very fluid. And I'm an improvisational artist, musician. And so I say, like, that's what I'm thinking I look for in teachers. Like, do you have any experience as an improv person, like either on stage or something else? Because you have to be able to say, like, I'm going to pivot now. oh, these kids are inspired in this moment. So this is what I had planned for my lesson, but we're going someplace completely different. We had, for example, in geography, we were having a conversation. We're studying geography through the lens of music, and it's a fascinating conversation because we're able to look at how cultures combine and how music has changed and what that means about these, integrations of people and culture. And it started morphing into a conversation about queer representation in music and arts and politics and all of these kind of things, and a comparison by region. And that conversation was magic and way above grade level for the students, like the kinds of, deep philosophical insights that they were sharing in this conversation. And if I had said, well, that's not what we're supposed to be talking about today, we would have missed that opportunity.
I can't remember. Ben's probably already looked into it. Ben is or probably already knows it. We had a guy on called Neil Malarkey, and talked about improvised leadership and the role. He set up the Comedy Store. Ben, correct? He set up the Comedy Store as a collective. I think was the comedy something, and he was in
comedy players episode.
Comedy,
by the way, episode 237 for anybody who's
237. Yeah, so Neil Malarkey and was in the same circle as Austin Powers.
Oh wow!
Why can I not remember?
Mike
Myers. So knew Mike Myers from that space, and just set up all of those kind of things, and actually did a role in Austin Powers 1, I think it was, or some. He's been in one of those movies, tiny little role, but what wonderful guy. Talk about improv in leadership. Ultimately, the world is ambiguous. Questions and education is ambiguous. How can you respond as a leader if you always play exactly the same role, because you don't know how you're going to respond if you don't know what's coming? So it kind of threw me off on that, and I love improv and all those kind of bits. But I suppose the thing that I really thought about when you were talking about that is, do you have to spend a lot of time with your educators or your facilitators or whatever you call them and your learners in regards to relearning how to learn, but also a lot of time nurturing and coaxing out of, no, it's okay, this is a safe space for you to have autonomy and to go off piste, and you're not going to be observed and you're not going to be criticised and challenged for literally just for doing that. Is that an awful amount of time that you spend, Robin, with your staff and your learners, to make sure that's a space that's okay and the psychological safety is there?
Yeah, absolutely. So for our teachers, some of our teachers that come from traditional public school really struggle because they need to get out of their own way. They really want to do this, but they struggle because they have been trained for decades to conform to learning standards, Common Core, all of these kind of things. And they overplan, they overprepare, and they also don't have confidence in themselves. I say, you can do this. You can pivot. You've been teaching biology for 20 years, for example. You have a huge toolkit of all of your knowledge. All you have to do is because it's natural for me, right? So I say, all you have to do is listen to the students, and when they're into something, pivot and pull something else out of your toolkit. And they're like, that's not the way that I operate. I carefully plan every minute of my entire session. Well, that's not going to work in this situation. So, we have to always be building up our teachers' confidence. I'm like, you were hired because you're experts in your field, right? You have the content knowledge you need. And you have to think about this student is really into this musician, or we have a lot of students with autism that have special interests. And we had a student that was really interested in ants and studied ants. And so I'm always thinking like, well, ants, social systems, structures. Okay, we can talk about geography. We can talk about ants in different world regions and similarities and difference. Like I can bring that in, but you have to be really creative. And so some educators don't think of themselves as creative people. They think of themselves as analytical people. And so we have to open that creativity again. So every Tuesday morning we have, teachers meetings, and we do kind of, let's check in any students that we're worried about. What are the wins for the school? But then we also talk about universal design for learning. We talk about project-based learning. I say I'm dripping for them a master's in special education. I'm like, I can't give you the the paper at the end, but I do teach in teacher prep programs and and masters of special education programs. So I'm always giving them more, little like mini lessons on supporting students with various learning needs. And so that's a big part of it. Lots of support for the teachers. It's very time consuming for them to kind of train up in this model, and they are required to read the foundational text, of course. You can't say that you're part of the pearl and have never read this, and I've read this book so many times. I can tell if the new teachers haven't actually read it. Their course evaluations are based on the textbook. This is what Dr. Pearl and Knight say needs to happen in the classroom, and so we ask the students, is this what's happening? The other thing is the students take foundations of democratic learning when they first come into the school, and I introduce them to the guiding principles of the Pearl. I say, here's the rules and responsibilities for the students. These were designed before you got here. Are these cool with you or not? Because we want to make sure that you have voice and they can bring it to the board and say, I wasn't here. I didn't agree to these things. I think this is crap. I'm not okay with this. We need to have a conversation. They haven't done that yet, but this is my promise to our students. And I think this is where we're very unique. They all meet me. They all take a class with me the first term. And I say, this is what I expect in the classroom. If this is not happening in the classroom, you come to me and tell me that it's not happening in the classroom, because this is my expectations. And I promise you, this is not just on our website. This is not on a flyer that went to your parents. This is my promise to you, students. This is my expectations. This is what a democratic classroom looks like, because they have to know. If they don't know what a democratic classroom looks like, and they go into the classroom and it's business as usual, they would just be like, well, this is just the way school is, right? So they hear from me directly. This is what it should look like. This is where you get voice and choice. This is where you get to be autonomous. This is where you make decisions. This is how we vote. These are, how things need to happen in the classroom always. If it's not, come talk to me. And then we joke. I say, although we're a democracy on these on these rules about what democratic education and classroom looks like, these are non-negotiables. So the teachers have to meet these expectations. So I'll give you an example of that. We use, again, universal design for learning. Our job is to help students understand how they learn best and help them understand how they can show us what they've learned in a way that works best for them. So when they have an activity, we give 3 options. You can demonstrate your end of unit knowledge in these 3 ways. Option 4 is always pitch me your own idea. Right? So because I've had the honor of, having really great relationships with my students, and I'll never forget this. I gave this, idea. Here's what we're going to be doing today. Da, da, da. And I'm like all excited. I think it's really cool. And the students just kind of blank look. And I was like, what's wrong? And somebody said, Dr. Robin, this is kind of stupid. And I was like, what? It's stupid. My idea was stupid. I thought it was going to be so cool. And I was like, so class, please tell me how this could not be stupid and what we could do instead. Right? That is a gift. And that's what I want my teachers to know. If your students have such a good relationship with you that they can say this activity is kind of stupid and seems kind of boring. Right? Okay, let's make it better. How can we not do it? And it ended up like in this amazing project-based learning that when I gave them the space to say my idea was stupid, and then we talk about, maybe more graceful ways to do that in the long run. But what would be better? They all got together and they all created this project that they wanted to work on together, that they were really passionate and interested in. And it was awesome.
Yeah, and I bet it was, because I'm sat here thinking, okay, there's not many times in my school career as a student and then as an educator and as an education leader where we did student voice other than to tick the box of going, okay, well, what would you really like to happen in the school? Okay, we'd like to change our school dinners, or we'd like a swimming pool, or all these other things like that. But genuinely to making change and giving agency into that young people's lives. and teachers' lives into that space. I think he's really important. And interesting though on this is that, not though, that sounds like it's going to be I don't agree with it. That wasn't what I was meaning. What I would say is that this is quite the move away from what we see in lots of schools in terms of it's about control and compliance.
Yeah.
It's about you say, we say, you do. It's the whole we know best, and therefore we will. And there is that directive model of, and even in all the schools that are, we don't have it's not just teaching from the front. We still have desks facing the front. We still have the teacher who has their own desk. We still have the screen. We still have death by PowerPoint. We still have, I'm directing what you're studying. Here's the curriculum that we're dictating to you. You have no say in what, like all those things. So what you're saying is incredibly alien to most people who will be listening to this podcast who are in the education world. Yet I'm sat here going, this makes sense. This makes sense. This makes sense. So how do we kind of get that that point where education, and I'm not saying that everybody can all of a sudden turn over and become a democratic school and that they're going to follow the principles from what you're building there at the Pearl. But how do you create an education that really does value student input and student voice? How do you do that beyond it being tokenistic?
Yeah. Talk less, listen more. Right. I mean, so that's a good start. Ask your students what's important to them. Give them opportunity to be voiced, switching from compliance. So I teach lots of workshops for educators, social workers, and I talk a lot about behavior management. And so many of the challenging behaviors in the classroom is because we're so focused in these classrooms on compliance, and the kids have no autonomy and agency. And when you provide this space, we lead with the why. Why are we doing this thing? Why is this important? Sometimes, when you have these real conversations, why do we have to do this? Well, because you need math to graduate with an accredited diploma, and that was your pathway, right? That's the why. And then how do we do it so that it's at least interesting to you? We have to know the kid. You have to know the kid. The big challenge is the classrooms are too big in many schools for really doing differentiated instruction. But if you're using universal design for learning, and my cohort of special educators right now, they're like, why didn't we just learn this when we were teachers? Because this is good instruction. I'm like, ding, 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 ding. Yes, that. I mean, it's in the name, universal design for learning. It is good teaching. It is good instruction. It is creating a better classroom environment for everyone. That's why it's universal, right? And when teachers start bringing in that, they start realizing, wait a second, by creating a class that's more engaging, that has different ways of learning, we all learn differently. We all express ourselves differently, whether or not you have a disability label. And so that also normalizes, we all need supports. Look at all of us, we can't see without our glasses. But if we switched and be like, Ben, you wear mine, and then we still have a problem, right? Because we all have glasses, but they're not the right prescription. And that's what we try to pretend like there's some kind of neurotypical in the classroom, and all the neurotypicals need the same thing. That's not true either. Right? We all experience the world differently. We all need things a little bit differently, and we all learn a little bit differently. And so when we have those conversations, the classroom becomes more engaging, and the students get excited. And for the teachers, and I promise this to the teachers all the time, when the students are excited and engaged, you spend more of your time teaching and less of your time with behavior management. And it's not about compliance. And I was just reading the reflections for the end of the special education part of the master's program that my current students have gone through. And so many of them said, I never really thought about behavior as communication before. I never really thought about how so many of the special education goals are all about compliance. And that's one of the things that really bristles me. I look at IEPs, many of them, every month, and every single goal on there is about behavior and compliance. And I'm like, where's the education in this? all we're trying to do is get people to comply. And in the world today, I'm a little bit riled up today because of, life situations. But when we train people only for compliance, it is so easy to see how they go along with things that are unethical, unjust, and truly horrific because they have been conditioned throughout their entire education system to comply.
Uh, we talk about this. We're passionate about it in terms of the ability to critically think and have autonomy to push back
Mhm.
positively. With kindness still. Just because kindness isn't coming this way, to push back with kindness in our hearts, to then say, no, I disagree, because ultimately our education system isn't broken. It was just
Designed
designed.
that way.
It was designed hundreds of years ago for factory workers that ultimately would they only wanted compliance. They didn't want rebellious children
Mhm.
and a rebellious world, and rebellious in a positive way, I guess. Rebels are often seen as negative, but ultimately rebels are what transform things, because ultimately the pushback comes when people disagree and say, I'm not having it.
Mhm.
Absolutely not. And I think we have built a system on work high end people having a lot of money and everybody else complying to ultimately make the machine go round.
Yep.
And the world will change when we have democracy, not just people just saying no, but ultimately it would be even better still, and be able to push back and have that autonomy and critically think for themselves is a skill that we really struggle with, I think, in education, probably
Yes.
because we've designed it that way to not allow it.
Exactly. And then the system was built that way, right? And I've done a lot of work with the Native American boarding schools in the United States. And when you look at the way the system was designed to literally break the spirit and separate families and to decimate the culture, I mean, these systems are designed the way. And I think one of the things that people often don't realize, they're like, the system's broken. No, systems work the way that they're designed to work. And so then you have to think about what is going on when the system is causing harm and people are trying to fix the system. The system doesn't want to be fixed, right? And also for our students with autism, this is why they have so many challenges in the mainstream school system, because people with autism generally, like everybody with autism is very, very different, but generally they can see patterns. They're not as willing to go along with things that are unjust, unkind. They're going to continue questioning that system. And that gets them in a lot of trouble in school. And then there's even more force on compliance, compliance, compliance. And then they're labeled as a behavior problem when they're saying, like, wait, hold up. There is something wrong with the system. I don't want to participate in this system. And so much of the training for students with autism is about having them learn to mask to fit in that system and not rock the boat, so to speak. And they're not having it. And so in our school, we say, we want you to come and be your best, most beautiful, authentic self. And you don't need to mask here, right? You can be you. And if we're doing something that doesn't feel right, if we are talking about content that you disagree with, bring me evidence. And so that's again where that critical thinking comes in, because in the Socratic seminar, if you're just like going off on your tangent because you've got this wild idea and your uncle said something and you're going along with your uncle, I was like, bring me the evidence. Bring the evidence into this. Where do you get that? What is the source? How many sources did you look at? So you can definitely challenge me. You can tell me I'm wrong, but tell me I'm wrong with evidence to give me enough information that I might change my mind. Because now you have evidence to say that, I was wrong. What I learned in school or in history or whatever was wrong.
Can't be just a no. There has to be some reason and some examples and some detail behind it. Love it.
Right.
You know what? We always finish the podcast with quickfire questions, and you
Okay.
know what? I'm excited for these ones because I think
Okay.
you're going to be rebellious. So let's see where we take it. So the first, I'll start, then Ben, and then I'll bring it home. So first question: if schools were judged like restaurants by how much customers actually enjoyed the experience, what would change overnight?
Well, we would listen to young people. I mean, everybody always says, "Oh, my teens won't talk to me," and I was like, "Oh, they talk. Oh, no, they talk to me. I know everything about what's going on in your house." And they're like, "How do you make that happen?" I was like, "Because I listen to them, and I'm curious. I ask them questions, and I listen to what they say. It's really not that hard."
Love that. So then, and especially because you work with the teacher trainer space, what's the most dangerous myth that educators tell themselves to avoid real change?
That the system is broken instead of what we were talking about, that it was designed that way.
Okay. Final one. If a 10-year-old asked you why they have to go to school, what would you actually say?
Because it's really good for your brain. And we want you to make sure that your brain can work in the best way that it possibly can so that you have the ability to make good choices, to think. It's like exercise, but it's exercise for your brain. And we want to make sure that your big, beautiful brain gets the opportunity to grow in this time period where it's like optimal growth can occur. And this is going to help you throughout your life. And they're going to go, whatever. And I'm going to say, no, really, it's the same as like exercise, the same as like riding your bike and getting stronger leg muscles, same kind of thing.
Love it. Love it. Well, Robin, thank you so much for joining us, especially after a late night yesterday and being out in over in Mexico. We appreciate it. It's probably getting warmer now as we get into the end of this podcast. We do appreciate your time. We appreciate what you're doing, and thank you for sharing your insights. I know that if people do want to find out a little bit more about the work that you're doing, we'll put the link in the show notes to the Pearl. I'm also going to put a link into the book that you recommended as well, because I think some people might be interested in having a little read of that. I ordered it as we're speaking, just so you know.
Nice.
And so it's been wonderful. For those of you who are listening or watching and got all the way to the end, don't forget you can join us at one of our roadshow events, or if we still got some tickets, we may well have. We've got a few to go at. Well, we did have. I don't know. By the time this goes out, how many tickets have we got left for the Edufuturists Uprising in Liverpool on 25th of June? If there are some still tickets available, then get yourself over to edufuturists.com/uprising26 and you'll be able to get yourself a ticket. I'll put a link in the show notes as well. But we are looking forward to having you with us. Robin, it has been wonderful. Thank you for this, and thank you for sharing what you're doing. And we'll speak again very soon.
Thank you.